Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars on what has to be one of the most muggy, miserable, shitty, horrible Florida June mornings of all time. I mean, it is a mess. The humidity is like this thick cloud of horror that just... I've got a mosquito right in front of the camera. I mean, it's just a curtain of miserable shit floating over everything. I'm already dripping. The glasses are fogged up. I can't see anything. I've just, in the viewfinder of the camera, I have a blur of a truck, and I'm hoping that's the right truck. So we're just going to get into this. But this just is too much. I mean, it's not fit for any humans to be around here right now, and yet here the hell I am. Despite recently having other options, here the hell I am, surrounded by really freaky sounding birds that sound pissed off, and God knows what they're going to do to me if they see me here. But anyway, let's just get into this. So the weather is obviously bad. I'm going to tell you, look, it's been a while since I did a video, partially because I'm so jammed up getting these cars ready for that Mecum auction coming up, and secondly because I just haven't had anything interesting cross my path lately. I'm just not going to do a video on a car that I've done before or a car that doesn't interest me, and you know, it just is one of those things. So hopefully this one makes up for some of that. It does interest me, even if it doesn't interest anyone else. The hell with it. These things are for me. Oh, God. Anyway, and I'm deep into the coronavirus whiskey. You'd think it would make the heat and the humidity more tolerable, but it doesn't. It just absolutely doesn't. Sean the Wheel Guy, okay? You know, I think he's the one who inspired Robert De Niro because he had a baby. Well, not personally. His wife had a baby. A very nice woman, actually. I have no idea how the hell Sean landed this woman. For one thing, he's deep into his 70s, and, you know, she's a nice, young, pretty lady. But somehow he managed to score this broad, and it worked out for him. And he very quickly ended up having a baby, which, you know, as if this weren't bad enough, he has mandatory attendance birthday parties for this infant. I went to the first birthday party, and that's where I saw those turtles having that weird and loud congress. Very, very seedy looking thing, and I'll put a video in of that now. But that was really disturbing, and of course, you know, it actually did make the birthday party a little better for me, but for, you know, I was there. Anyway, it gets worse, because when a babysitter becomes available, he totes this child over to my shop, where the child inevitably takes a giant wet shit in his diaper. I don't know why he saves it for my shop, but he seems to. And then Sean ends up changing this thing on site. And I mean, honestly, I think it's incredibly unfair to inflict this process on a person who has, with great effort, avoided ever having any kind of children or even being around children. All of a sudden, there it is, shitty diaper, and Sean holding it, giggling. And I just think, what the hell did I do to deserve this? I told him I could probably find a really strong buyer for the child. But do you think he or his nice wife would listen? No. You know, they're going to keep the thing, despite, you know, the ability to, frankly, sell it for a shocking amount of money. But, yeah, whatever. People do what they do. Secondly, my friends, and I'm using air quotes here. I really am. I mean, I don't even know if I have friends anymore. It includes Peter, Al, Chris, who we've talked about, the worst human on earth, even Penelope. They've all recently taken these trips to much cooler climates, and for some reason they feel the need to send me screenshots of the weather. Yeah, you know, they go up wherever in the mountains somewhere. It's like 70 in the day, 49 at night. They snap a picture of the Weather Channel thing and send it to me while I'm here roasting away in June, miserable. And I think, you know, wow, I could hop in a vehicle, even this Explorer here, drive through the night, find out where the hell they're staying, go there and club them to death, whatever the closest blunt object I can find is. And I fantasize about that. But I don't do it. I don't want to end up in prison like Dalton, who's got his court date coming up for that evasion thing. I actually briefly considered doing a GoFundMe for him, so he could get a lawyer, and it just didn't come together. And I'm not sure anyone has any sympathy for a nitwit who runs from the police anyway, so... Anyway, I'm digressing. Let me just get into this. This is a 1996 Ford Explorer XLT, and it's what I would argue was the first mass-market SUV designed for what companies then knew would be the fastest growing and most profitable segment of the American, if not the whole global car market. Now, obviously, there were SUVs before this. I am in no way claiming this was the first one, but I am going to claim that this is the first one that was designed by the company when they knew what was going to happen with SUVs, and we'll get into why as we go. But when this truck was made, and yes, this is when pretty much all SUVs were genuine trucks, the sedan still ruled the car world and comprised most of what you saw on the streets. I mean, people still bought sedans. There were personal luxury coupes, but they were fading fast. In fact, I would argue the SUV completely replaced them even before SUVs were a thing. And, now not so much. The sedan, it actually wasn't that long ago where SUVs alone overtook them, but by 1999, light trucks and SUVs were selling more than cars. I think it was like 2015 when SUVs alone overtook cars. But for a very, very long time, SUVs ruled the road, and frankly, they're not even trucks anymore. They don't even pretend to have any off-road capability at all. I mean, they're just stretched out, heightened hatchbacks that, people can pretend is some sort of a sport utility vehicle, and everybody builds them. It's widely accepted that the Cayenne, that SUV saved Porsche from bankruptcy, which did not go unnoticed by other luxury brands. And now you've got Rolls-Royce SUVs, Bentley SUVs, Lamborghini SUVs, Jaguar SUVs, and God knows what else. You've even got an electric Mustang SUV. I mean, that's just the way the world has gone. But why? I blame women. Women mostly. While the minivan, the Swiss Army knife of the car world, first appeared in the 1980s, women quickly realized that while it was the perfect family vehicle in terms of space, room, capacity, everything else, it just didn't make them look sexy. And they wanted to look like wildlife photographers. This is the problem with women. So here's this perfect machine made for the family, and it just became no good. And all of a sudden, SUVs became available. Women flocked to them because they thought it improved their image. Separating a woman from an SUV today is like prying away TikTok from a snowflake. I mean, they'll basically shut down and go into a deep depression. But while women are the main perpetrators of the SUV fad, and I don't even know if you can call it a fad anymore, it's been going on so long, men are not entirely blameless. I mean, we've always been attracted to, big wagons and off-road vehicles that serve a practical purpose if we ever need them. And SUVs fit neatly into that, or at least they once did. Again, not anymore, not really. So, all in all, the SUV craze that sort of started almost by accident with the Jeep XJ in the 80s, which was designed by Renault, by the way. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And in fact, that's the video, I think, where the goats ended up on the Porsche, which has become kind of a thing. But anyway, that was almost an accident, but now not anymore. And Ford, Chevy, GM, and all the other companies, they crafted this razor-sharp arrow pointed directly at the psyche of American consumers of both genders. I mean, men for their love of practicality and mechanical overkill, and women for their desperation to not become their mothers. And frankly, this just isn't a healthy basis for a product at all. And that's where we find ourselves today. So, look, I'm going to take a break right now because I'm dripping. I can't see anything. And then we're going to come back and get directly into this car. So bear with me one moment. All right, so let's just keep going. You can certainly tell Peter's away, by the way. And look at the grass. He's left his teenage son in charge of that. And you can see how well that's going for him. But anyway, let's just get into this thing. So look, the first generation Explorer came out in 1991 to replace the Bronco 2, and I'm not sure how much thought Ford put into it. You know, it was a neat piece, but it was a rough riding two-door Ranger truck-based thing with back seats and a hatch. I mean, not unlike the earlier Toyota 4Runners. You know, it was just a truck that they turned into an SUV. The thing about it is, it was an overnight success, and it started selling insanely. It had people lining up at the Ford dealerships, paying premiums over sticker. And by the time 94 rolled around, they were selling 300,000 units, you know, per year. It was a very, very big deal, and I don't think that went unnoticed by Ford. So basically, they realized that they better do the next generation right when it came time for a refresh. I mean, the thing was outselling the Chevy Blazer and the GMC Jimmy and the Jeep and, you know, all the other imports combined. I mean, it was basically, it just created an absolute sensation. So I think Ford put their smartest people on the job when it came time to change things, who knew what to change and knew what to leave alone. They gave it the same thought that they probably do when they do the F-150, which is obviously a hugely important vehicle for Ford. They left the same basic shape. If you look from the back of the fenders, the front fenders back, it's basically the same as the prior generation Explorer. They did update the nose. They made it more rounded, less boxy. They put in these sort of snazzy looking, rounded European style headlamps, a more aggressive grille, actually a very nice use of chrome on it, and you know, it just gave it the right look. And bear in mind again that in the 90s, like that, these things were trucks, and they were thought of as trucks. SUVs were not at this time where everything has to look like an SUV, even if it's absolute, you know, couldn't get its way out of a mud puddle. Back then, in '96, they still had to be trucks, but they did a pretty nice job of it. And leaving that same basic shape was smart, and updating it was smart. But that's not really the key to what made this thing successful. It's very attractive, I think, in this XLT form. I mean, there was an Eddie Bauer Unlimited thing. The Eddie Bauer had these sort of bolt-on wheel flares, which I think look good at the time, but look a little bit busy and strange today. The XLT, this one, looks a little bit more pure to me, and I think it works very, very well. You've got the alloy wheels, which was an upgrade. You've got, you know, white letter tires. You've got sort of rocker panel ground effects, if you will. An impact strip down the side. Very funky looking antenna. I have to say that's kind of a cool piece for a fixed antenna. Just basic black trim around the windows. Monochromatic door handles. You know, very simplistic taillights. Going to the back, you've got more chrome on the bumpers with, you know, plasticky surrounds. You know, looks decent. You got a luggage rack up top, which was probably optional, but I'm sure everyone had it, and it looks good. And basically, the thing just looked proper, looked nice, did not diverge too much from the success of the first gen, and of course ended up selling extremely well. But now let's do the most important changes, and I usually jump into the trunk and the and whatnot, but we're going to jump into the mechanicals, because that is my argument about why I think this was the first of what was to become the modern idea of the SUV. You know, they took this truck, this big body-on-frame, you know, truck, and they made it into something that would be a lot more car-like. And the way they did that, well, let's look under the hood. We'll just get that out of the way right now. I know we're a little bit out of order, but the hell with it. We're going to do it this way. And this is not going to be easy one-handed, by the way. It's a weird setup it's got. And we're going to give it a shot. Alright, right, there we go. All right, so here's this German-made 4-liter V6, and that was actually a carryover from the prior gen, had been around for a while, and was not particularly groundbreaking at all. 160 horsepower, 225 foot-pounds of torque, just very, very adequate. But here's what they did. They got rid of the front twin I-beam suspension, that's very truck-like, and instead put in a unequal length arm independent front suspension, much more road friendly, much more highway friendly than the prior gen, which, you know, again, rode like a truck. This drove less like a truck. They also gave it rack and pinion steering, which was one of the first trucks to get that. That made it, again, more precise in your steering, more friendly, happier, that sort of thing. They gave it 4-wheel disc brakes with standard ABS. This was not the kind of stuff that was on trucks at the time, and I think that's where Ford put their money and put their bet, that they're going to make this SUV much more car-like, and that's the way it went. There you see the ABS pump. They also put in what they called a Select Track 4-wheel drive. You could get this all-wheel drive system, that was optional. For the men, they put in 4-wheel drive, but they called it a Control Track, not Select Track. And we'll get into it when we drive the truck inside, but it basically makes 4-wheel drive simple, easy, and even accessible by most basic female. You know, anyone could use the 4-wheel drive in this thing. And I think that's the key to what Ford had in mind at the time. And again, why I argue that this is the first true modern SUV. I mean, there's, of course, the Jeep XJ from the 80s was, you know, the thing that sort of started it all. But I think this truck represents when Ford actually noticed what the hell was going on and decided to make it work. They also put in a Borg-Warner 4-speed automatic. You put in also the dual factory airbags, which this was one of the first trucks to have twin airbags, which would have appealed to female buyers at the time. An integrated baby seat in the back, as if they didn't know what was going on. No more minivans. And you can tell that Ford came to this game ready to play. So, you know, there it is. I'm going to take a break now before we get into the interior of it. But I think it's those mechanical revisions that make this thing what is truly the first modern SUV in terms of Ford wanting it to drive like a car. I would get into this. It's the era of that whole Firestone thing. If you remember that, there were big lawsuits and all sorts of shit going on. And when you read into it, it does seem like Ford, and more so Firestone, did a lot of corporate shenanigans to try and hide what was going on. But I think the long story short is Firestone was putting tires on these things that were real passenger car tires. They were not particularly load rated. They were not heavy duty rated. And then people were using them, you know, to bring 7 kids along and luggage and boat towing and all sorts of things that they weren't designed to accommodate. And the tread started to separate. It would separate at highway speeds, give you severe oversteer, and then a lot of these things rolled over because of their high sense of or high position of gravity. They had a very high center of gravity, and it became, you know, a big issue for Ford and Firestone, and broke up, you know, decades of their companionship. Ford and Firestone went separate ways after that because they each blamed each other. Ford also made the Explorer roof a little bit lighter, and it would end up collapsing when it rolled. There's a lot of shit going on with that, and no one particular thing to blame, although I think Firestone does hold the blame for it more than anyone. That said, it sure as hell didn't prevent people from buying the things, and buy them they did, and they continued to sell like absolute insanity, and people went nuts for them. So anyway, there it is. I'm going to pause for a minute, then we're going to get into the interior and go for a drive. All right, so let's have a look inside this thing, because I am melting. I am absolutely melting. I'm telling you, after this auction, after these cars go through, I am bailing out of this town for a month, and I don't care what happens, who I see, where I go, or what I do. It's going to be somewhere cool, somewhere chilly, and everyone else can go straight to hell. So that's the plan. Anyway, let's have a look in back. So look, in traditional wagon style, you click that switch this way and you can open just the glass, you know, so you can have a pitch through to throw your groceries in or whatnot. It's, you know, probably made for women. And I say that because of this. Otherwise, you have to go to the right and lift up the whole hatch. And, you know, even with those big struts, it takes a bit of an effort. And this was the days before they had the, you know, push button. Man, even big work trucks today have buttons you can push to lift and lower the tailgate, which is pathetic. And it just shows how far we've fallen as a human race, that we can't even lift our own tailgates. But anyway, the lift gate in this thing is manual, and I guess women just put up with that, again, because you had to do it in a minivan as well. And that way you could still look like, you know, you weren't your mother. The pool boy might still be attracted to you. You can see it had tons of luggage room back here, which is great. And again, it's why I give that comparison to the Country Squire wagon. I mean, this is the family station wagon of the 90s, and it worked well in that capacity. Here you can see the original format still with it. I mean, this is such a well-preserved example. Most of these things were chewed up and spit out. It's weird that somebody preserved this one in the condition it's in. You open up this, and I have to say the fit and finish of this thing is actually pretty good. There's your rear washer reservoir. You've got some gloves in there and some jacks and tire changing shit. And I have to say, I'm kind of impressed with the quality of this, the fit and finish. And I think that also goes to just how, you know, Ford was pretty hot on how these cars were going to make them a lot of money. You see it as a door lock thing there, which is kind of cool. You can work the door locks Mercedes style. You also have a little infant containment in that. You'd have to have a pretty small infant. Sean's, the wheel guy's, too big to put in there now, but there was a time he would have fit. Otherwise, you just have to let him roll around here in the back. You could probably use these little luggage straps to, you know, bungee him down. Obviously, those the seats do fold forward to create even more cargo, which is, you know, terrific stuff. And they give you this nice little tug handle here to close the tailgate once it's opened. Back seats, your Canadians are going to be pretty chipper. You've got the split bench, 60/40, works pretty good. XLT didn't come with leather. Well, I guess you could get it, but it has this sort of interesting herringbone looking cloth stuff, which looks nice. And, you know, again, the door panels, yeah, it's all plastic fantastic, but it fits together nice, and it hasn't loosened up over the course of... God, this thing's almost 30 years old. It's almost 30 years old. It's unbelievable to me. You had ashtrays because people were still kind of smoking in the 90s. Back here you have radio controls, a little place Dalton didn't bother to clean. You got some cup holders that flip down, some rear AC vents. You know, all very nice stuff. Little pocket here to put a handgun if you need to for the backseat guys. And everything very, very proper. I tell you what, I'm gonna put my crap in the back right now. Then we're just gonna hop in the front seats and look around there and go from there. I will show you this. This has been a Ford staple for years, and they're still doing it now. And that's that key code entry. And the people who love it, and they will never do without it. Other people think, God, that's stupid. But, you know, I'm somewhere in between. But anyway, you could use that to open up the car, open up the hatch, and, you know, do what you need to do. So let me get my crap in the back, then we're going to hop in the front and go. All right, you can see here the rear leaf springs, if you look down there, also the spare tire underneath the back. It's all very truck-like, and that's why I think that this generation of SUVs from the, you know, late 80s, early, they'll be collectible because they still do act as trucks, and they're somewhat capable off-road machines. Companies don't even pretend to need to do that anymore because most of your SUVs are just going to be parked in the Whole Foods parking lot while people who are pretending to be something they're not go in to shop for $9 avocados. But anyway, it is what it is. So let's get inside this thing and see what we got. So up front, you've got these dual power bucket seats, part of the XLT thing. Passenger seat was probably optional, but they work great. They've got a little forward thigh support. They've got sort of nice lumbar and side supports. And again, the condition of this thing for being an SUV of the 90s is remarkable because these, you know, I think this Gen Explorer has the It has the record of being the most traded in vehicle during that whole ridiculous cash for clunkers crap that happened. So most of these things got chewed up and thrown away by second, third, fourth owners. This is a one-owner vehicle with 75 on it, which is pretty low, and you can tell that it's been well kept over the years. So it's nice to have one like this to review, because you're just not going to find them usually. Most of them are just absolute junk. Door panel, again, plastic, fantastic, but you got carpet, you got a little map pocket there for switchblades and narcotics and such. Your power windows, locks, mirrors, shit here that's designed to look like leather but isn't. A classic Ford steering wheel that was used in basically every Ford ever, with the little cruise control button. Let's fire it up and get some AC going. God, maybe I can dry out a little bit. So there it is. That V6 fires right to life as a German V6 should. Some max AC. I'm going to turn the fan down so it's not too loud, but at least I get some cool air blowing on me. Door is ajar. So which door is ajar? Not this one. Probably the tailgate, which I didn't close hard enough. Fuck's sake. But that's going to take care of it. You can also get these things with the manual, which is kind of cool. Would have been nice if this had it, but I bet about like none of them came with manual gearboxes. If you find one of those, you really found the holy grail. But anyway, you've got a pretty well laid out instrument cluster. You've got your obviously full gauge, temperature gauge, tach, 120 mile an hour speedo, oil pressure, and voltmeter. Nice, all you need. You see just 75 on the clock of this thing, which is impressive. You've got a tilt steering column, which I like because it tilts the whole column. A lot of Fords just tilt the wheel, which I don't like. There's your light switch and dimmer on this sort of plasticky dashboard fascia. Here's your, I bet that's loud. Let me turn that down more. You got sort of an audio system in here. You could get a fancier one that had a CD changer in here. This one doesn't, but yeah, it's good enough. And it has nice big knobs, unlike the prior gen Fords, which had those little teeny tiny knobs, which were shitty. Here's your rear wipers, your rear defrost, your fog lamps, climate control, lighter. Let me get into the four-wheel drive in a second. You got a nice set of books in the glove box. There's the dual airbags, which again was, pretty novel for the time. You got cocaine mirrors left and right up in the sun visors. You got some sort of little trip computer, which I can't get to work, but I haven't really tried that hard, and place to store sunglasses or whatnot. Okay, so the four-wheel drive setup is cool, and this Select Track or whatever it was called, not Select, whatever, it doesn't matter. You put the thing in neutral. All right, and then you go to four-wheel drive auto. All right, and there it lights up. Now, what this is going to do is work almost like a traction control. It's going to be two-wheel drive until you need four-wheel drive, and then it's going to engage the center clutch on the front axles, which turn it into four-wheel drive when it senses slippage, and that's pretty damn cool and advanced for the time, and frankly easy enough that even a woman could use it. I don't know if that's sexist or not, but I don't care. But it is, and very nice simple system that replaced the more troublesome system on the prior one, and was pretty advanced for the time. And again, because SUVs were truck-like, it actually has 4 low, which you could then go into a neutral. And it's gonna, yeah, there you've got your indicator light. So now if you have some serious off-roading to do, it'll actually do it. And that is one of the capabilities of these 90s SUVs that's basically been lost. But, we're in Naples. I'm going back into two-wheel drive because you just don't need it if you don't need it. See what we got on the radio. What was that, Stone Temple Pilots? I don't know. Yeah, they all sound the same to me. Let's see what's on this
free
one.
5-part podcast here.
Nothing. Anyway, I'm going to get, that was Pearl Jam, by the way. I know I'm going to get shit for that. There's a cassette, your lighter, everything nice. Down here you got a couple of compartments that obviously would have been options on an Eddie Bauer or something, and an ashtray, because again, people still smoked in the 90s. Cup holders. This thing, I thought, what the frig is this? It looks like a place where an e-brake handle would have gone. I was laboring over it until I found out later it's a tissue dispenser, possibly designed to make prostitution easy. I don't know, but if you open this up and pull up this little coin purse, which is quaint, you can put in a tissue box there and have it actually coming out the front. So if you're one of these people who, you know, snots a lot, this car has you covered. You could turn your overdrive on and off at the end of the shift lever there. You got your wipers there. You got your cruise control buttons, and you know, it's all everything you need. I can see why people like these things. I mean, they feel pretty well made. They feel pretty well equipped. They drive nice because of the rack and pinion and that independent front suspension. And you know, again, Ford just pointed this arrow at the psyche of the, you know, the American people, and it's cruel. It's absolutely, they talk them into buying these things that they just don't need because of the way it makes them look and feel. You get adequate acceleration out of the 4-liter. I want to say 0 to 60 time is around 10 seconds, quarter mile around 17. You're not going to set any land speed records, but it does what it needs to do. My nephew actually did the windshield. I can't blame him for the bug marks that happened on the ride home. Yeah, all in all, it's probably better than Dalton's windshield. Dalton. Anyway, so it goes down the road nice. Much, much nicer than the first gen. And again, that's because of that independent front suspension with the unequal arms that's very well designed and very, at the time, untruck-like, as was the rack and pinion, as was the 4-wheel disc brakes with ABS. This is all car stuff, and that's what tells me that Ford had a plan, and that they were going to make these things much more civilized, much more drivable, and much more appealing to the mass market to get even more people to buy them. And now that has led to basically every stupid thing on the road looking like an SUV, and, you know, giving up the whole pretense that it even has to have any truck-like qualities at all. You just take a little hatchback, stretch it out, make it taller, and boom, you've got an SUV, and people can pretend what they want to pretend. A little bit noisy, but you know, what are you gonna do? That's just Ford quality control. They didn't put enough padding in it. But, you know, it goes down the road nice. It steers very precisely. It brakes well. It does what it's supposed to do, and quite frankly, I can see why they sold like crazy. Guys felt they were a station wagon, and women didn't have to look like their mothers. They still remained mildly attractive to the pool boy, at least in their minds. So, yeah, just what an unhealthy marketing strategy, you know, as a way to just bilk people out of their mental health. Anyway, so look, I'm not going to keep, there's nothing but straight roads. It's all kind of tedious and boring. I'm going to leave it there. I don't know how long this video is, but I didn't try to shorten it for anyone, so you don't have to blame my nephew. I have a feeling it's still going to be the 40-minute variety. And I've got a Cadillac Eldorado coming up soon. That's going to be a fun one. And we'll see what else I haven't touched that Pinto with the big block in it. Someday soon I'm going to make something happen with that. And otherwise I'm just going to keep getting this crap ready for the auction, and then disappear to North Carolina or Tennessee for a while. So thank you very much for having a look. Genuinely appreciate it. And we will see you with the next one. Take care.